So how many of you have thought about coming out with your own phone app? We carry our phones around with us almost everywhere. They're our connection to the world. And we may have heard or read about these success stories about just regular individuals coming up with ideas and then developing these very successful app businesses. Well, in this episode of BootstrapMD, you're going to hear one more. This internist actually reached out to me last summer. He was kind of dismayed about the limitations in terms of health education in his own practice, and he felt that through an app, he could reach countless more people, and he did exactly that. You'll hear about everything here, guys. You'll hear about the trials and tribulations of actually getting an app, finding a developer. We really left no stone unturned. And we'll talk about how the successes led to even other avenues of revenue, including an online education portal and a YouTube channel. My interview with Dr. Daniel Erichsen on this episode of BootstrapMD.
Remember when you could practice medicine on your own terms? What if you could take control of your physician career, make more money while working smarter, not harder? Pick up your copy of The Positioned Physician. Earn more, work smart, and love medicine again. Now updated for 2021, The Positioned Physician details one doctor's journey from burnt-out employee to successful entrepreneur. Whether you are in residency, in mid-career, or close to retirement, after reading The Positioned Physician, you'll gain the knowledge that can strategically impact your doctor life. The Positioned Physician, now available on Amazon Kindle and paperback.
Hey guys, it's Dr. Michael Ming. Welcome to another episode of BootstrapMD. If you've been following us on the program, you know I love to spotlight physician entrepreneurs. And actually last summer, this doctor reached out to me and unfortunately, I don't know if it went into my spam folder or not, but once I heard about his story, I said, I need to have this physician on. His name is Dr. Daniel Erichsen. He is from Eugene, Oregon, and he's a sleep specialist, but he had an idea about just basically sharing his message more out into the world. Outside of his patients, he saw that there was a dearth of information on insomnia and other aspects related to sleep, and he wanted to create an app. And I know many of you are interested in either creating an app or maybe you have an app available and maybe you don't know how to market it. He was actually successful 6 weeks after he launched his app. We're going to hear all about the trials and tribulations that actually led to creating a website for certification of sleep providers. But enough with me. They want to hear from you. Dr. Daniel Erichsen, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoy talking to you.
This is good. And, I think a lot of times when I have a lot of doctors who either are entrepreneurs or what I call wantrepreneurs, and maybe they live vicariously through us. And I always try to highlight examples of doctors who are actually out there in the trenches. So before we begin, I always like to hear about origin stories. I'm a little bit of a comic book nerd. How did Peter Parker become Spider-Man? So how did you become from Dr. Daniel Erichsen to the sleep coach?
So absolutely. This is a good one. And I love those origin stories too. So I'll share mine, which is this one. So just very briefly, my core specialty is actually in pediatrics. And I did my residency back in the Bronx, New York. And I thought I was going to be I wanted to niche down to become a little bit more narrow. And I thought I would be an intensivist maybe or something like that. But I realized that lifestyle wasn't for me. I wanted something more kind of, more lifestyle friendly, if you will. And it so happened that a friend of mine just mentioned, hey, Daniel, do you know that there's a fellowship in sleep medicine? And I was really curious and intrigued. And really, I got into it and I applied, got the fellowship, and I really enjoyed it. And during fellowship, I learned mostly about sleep apnea. That's like the big thing, and a little bit about insomnia. But then as I started practicing as an attending, which is about 10 years ago now, I saw that insomnia is really, really a big problem, just as big as sleep apnea. A lot of people struggle with sleep. And I would teach these methods called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's kind of a mouthful, but it's quite straightforward. And I would always, or very often I would ask people, when I heard them talk about their insomnia, I would say, have you heard about CBTI? Have you heard about CBT? And, either they would say no, or they would go like, CBD. Yeah, I've tried that. I've tried CBD. I was like, no, not CBD, CBT. And so anyway, that's just a way of saying, like, I realized that there were millions of people struggling, and like really virtually nobody got like a helpful message. So that's somewhere along the journey. I was like, there has to be a better way. There must be a way of getting the message out there to people. And that's how I kind of transitioned, towards a sleep coach.
Now, most of our listeners, we do have doctors and non-doctors, but, most of our listeners are doctors. And I can't even remember if we got any education on sleep. I know a lot of us had lack of sleep. I know I did in my residency, and continue to have this. And obviously it's a huge problem. So kind of define us for us. What is your definition of insomnia?
No, that's a really good question, and very important, because there's often a lot of confusion. Sleep deprivation, which we had as residents, is very different. That's just, you don't have enough opportunity for sleep. And when you get a chance to sleep, you typically have no problems whatsoever sleeping. You sleep really easily, in fact. Whereas insomnia it's a struggle. It's when somebody tells you, like, I just can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. No matter what I do, nothing helps. And that's the sense that there's something wrong with me. And basically they're really, really trying hard to sleep, but sleep just doesn't happen for them. That struggle, that is insomnia.
So when you were deciding to create an app, first, why did you consider creating an app for insomnia?
Good question. And that actually goes back to a not very successful venture with an app, actually many years ago. This was just after I finished fellowship, and I had this idea that you could create an app that people could take their smartphone and use this, the thing you use like when you're jogging, you put it on your arm. People could put their smartphone on their legs and check if they had like leg movements, kind of like restless legs, in their sleep, and monitor it. And that's one of those, like, you create a product that nobody wants. Like, there was no interest for that whatsoever.
Or at least it's hard to market.
Yeah, hard to market. Yeah, exactly. And hard to get people interested in. But that was with a friend who was like programmed himself. So apps were a little bit on my radar, and I had a little bit of experience with it. And I just felt like, with everybody having a smartphone and the ease of just downloading an app and being right there, like that sort of, led me towards like an app would be a really good, a good way.
Now the app is called Bedtyme, and that's BEDTYME. So it's with a Y. How did that get started?
Yes. So what happened? So in clinic, very briefly here, the core of like CBTI is that, someone who has trouble sleeping often spends a lot of time in bed. And actually, when they spend less time in bed and are more sleepy when they go to bed, that typically helps. So I had this idea, and I realized it was kind of a naive idea, that you could basically boil it down to an algorithm that if somebody said, like, okay, I'm going to spend this amount of time in bed, and it calculates how much percentage of that they sleep, then it could do a suggestion. It could be basically almost like an automatic solution. So I thought that was fantastic when I thought of the idea. And so I thought this could be a simple algorithmic solution that could really help people. So that was and the idea actually came to me in the sleep conference in June, like 2017 in June in Boston. It just, like, I had that idea, and it took a while. It took about 6 months till I started executing on it. And I found online on like one of these websites, I found a developer in Russia that could build it for me. And, it was expensive. It was like $40 an hour. And the total cost of creating that app, honestly, was probably like 50 to 40,000 or something.
Wow.
And the sad part of that was that my wife actually was sort of a little skeptical. She was like, Daniel, like, how is this actually going to help people? And I was like, oh no, it's going to work great. Like, people are just they're going to sleep better and stuff. But she was right. Like, when we launched that first one, then it was like people used it, but nobody actually got better, because it was lacking in education and support and guidance, etc. Like, people didn't really do much better. But and that's the other kind of another learning point here is that you have an idea and you launch it, and then you could easily, at that point, I could have easily gone like, oh no, it didn't work. Let me like scratch the whole idea. But I knew there was something there. So that became a complete rehaul, where instead it became this, like I added a curriculum and a coaching, a built-in coach within the app. And that's when it really started to work. That's when it really, so you mentioned like 6 weeks after launching, it started making money. That was actually the relaunch. But since then it's starting doing really, really well.
So you mentioned it cost, maybe 40 to 50,000. Was it just the development time for the algorithm, or was this guy taking you for a ride? Tell me more about that. That seems pretty expensive for an app, or is it? I don't know.
I think, I would say overall, I think development costs are coming down quickly, but I think I think they were a good company. It was just that the way I had created it, it was pretty complex, and it did require a lot of work. But what then happened was that we came, actually it was very serendipitous. It was like my kid had a play date with another kid, and the dad was like mentioning that he was an app developer, and I was like, really? And he actually did this different type of apps, where the first one was like native only for iOS, only for Apple. But there are these softwares now where you can create for both, and we used so he used that. So anyway, long story short here, the recreating it actually became much less costly than the first one. So for anyone out there thinking about it, we use software that can create for both, and that becomes much less costly.
Now, so you found a local developer, a friend of a friend. Did that seem to speed up the development process rather than going overseas?
It was so much better. Imagine with the first developer that were in Russia. Again, they were nice people, but it was also like I had to sketch things on a paper, like take a picture of it, send it to them. They created it, they sent it back to me. Then I had to, oh no, this is not what I wanted. And also what was so nerve-wracking, honestly, was that whenever there was a bug, I had to, describe it to them, send it over to them. They had to try to figure it out and then create a new build. And it could take like weeks. And in the meantime, a client couldn't access their thing. It was very nerve-wracking. Now it's so much better to have someone within the company. And by the way, this the local person we found, his name is Hang. I gave him a part of the company for him to become the CTO. And that also, like when we have somebody on board like that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that opens up a whole lot of new questions, and I know we're probably going to get a lot of feedback from this call. But just so I have the time frame, so you originally launched it in 2017.
The idea came June 2017. Started actually working on it with this Russian company in like January of 2018, and launched it for the first time in I want to say it was like August or September of 2018. And then it took about like 6 months to figure out that initial thing wasn't working. We relaunched it with the same Russian company, like a second relaunch, when was that? That was like timeline wise, maybe mid 2019. And then the final reversion happened and then that relaunch was about the time I emailed you.
Okay. So that was in July of 2020.
Yes.
So when you initially made your deal with the local developer, was it strictly, cash for services, or did you say, hey, I'm going to give you a piece of the company? When did that discussion happen?
No, absolutely. It's a very good question. And it's like this, it's a nice piece of the story there. So we had this play date, and he talked about how he was an app developer, and me, my wife, and she's, by the way, she's a big part of the company. Most of the good ideas come from her. We were kind of like, he's perfect for us. And he lives in Eugene. It's kind of crazy. So I literally, when I came home, I just texted him and said, hey, do you want to meet up in Starbucks tomorrow? And we did. So he came there, and I was a little bit nervous because I really wanted him, but I had to convince him that this was a good idea. So I basically told him listen, we have this app. and we have seen that people are willing to pay money for this type of service, and we've brought in a little bit of money. So I was just convincing him that it would be a good deal, and I offered him a small percentage in the company, and for him to become the CTO. And now he has a team in China that he works with, for other purposes, but so he just oversees it, and then we've paid them a little bit in developers, but that's how it happened, basically.
Great. That's really good to know. So let's talk about the app itself. I know we talked a little bit about it. It's called Bedtyme. And what tell me what it's all about.
Absolutely. So again, when somebody has trouble sleeping, like insomnia, it's sort of like an anxiety and a miseducation thing. So it's really pretty straightforward. And by the way, I want to quickly mention that there is this very successful app for weight loss that is called Noom, Noom. You know about it?
Uh-huh.
We basically have the exact same model. We took it from them, really. So every day on the app, you get this an educational text module or two.
I have to edit that out, by the way. Just kidding. Go on.
No problem. So I don't think they mind. Actually, I told them that I took it from them, and they in Twitter they said good for you or something like that. So they know it. But so every day you get a text, educational text module, and you have access to a coach within the app, and that actually is it. So every day you learn something, and there's a little tracking function. You can kind of see how you're doing, and that's it. It's pretty simple. That is it. So
you're going to steal my thunder, because there's this joke that I had in my back of my head. You just give them content so they fall asleep, or no? So how does that work? It's a paid model or free trial? What is Bedtyme? How is the financials? How do you set that up?
Yeah, no, it's exactly. I think it's called freemium. So it's free for 1 week, and then it's kind of like Netflix. You sign up for free, but then you do give your payment information. So if you don't unsubscribe, then you are subscribed, and you will be charged after 1 week. And we started off with a 2-week free trial, and then it was, I believe, $39 per month, and then we went up to $69. And I know the thing is that it requires a lot of education and coaching. So if you compare it to other products, this is still very cheap. So we actually just a few weeks ago, we upped the price to $129. So after a free trial, it's $129, which I think is going to be a good price for a long period of time. But people are still purchasing it, still doing well, etc. So that's our current model.
I got to ask you, are you willing to share numbers, either users or revenue, from the app?
Absolutely. So at this point in time, I have. So in my interface as a coach, I only see the clients that I talked with in the last week. So they're probably more, but I think I have around 40 to 50 active paying clients. But we only recently changed the price. So I'll share with you that at this point in time, the app is bringing in probably around $2,500 a month.
Very nice, very nice. Now I know you're a sleep specialist. Has that money been able to reduce your hours, or are you still working full time? How has that impacted your job, your career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So still, I haven't actually paid myself anything from the money we're bringing in, and I have gone down to part-time position. So I went down from 100% to 70%, and partly it is because I really want to focus more on the side projects, and partly it was because of COVID too. Things became very slow, so I'm on an RVU base, so it made sense also to decrease my time. So right now I'm working 70%, 3 days a week.
Now I like what you said. It's very difficult to hit a home run. When you're first up at bat, you get it from major league, you hit a home run, and it's actually gratifying to hear that you mentioned that you had a failure or your first attempt didn't succeed as where you want to. You got the app out of the way. It's successful. It's on iOS, and I believe now it's on Android, correct?
Yep, correct.
It's on Android. You mentioned that now that there are companies out there that let you do both, and then I guess if you could get back in a time machine and change it, you would probably start with that. Are there any things that you learned, any lessons learned from this app, or did everything go as smooth as you're telling us it did?
No, it was not very smooth at all, actually. Like, again, like the first version of the app, which was quite expensive, it was not a good, like the idea was not sound. It was not a good model. So I think for anyone out there that has this, fairly ambitious like entrepreneurial idea, that your first product may very well be not that great, and then but that's just like you can learn so much from that if you're willing to like change trajectory, learn from what didn't work. Then iteration by iteration, you will get to a product that works. That's huge.
Now, sometimes you see things like with Shark Tank, or they'll have a commercial where they're launching a product and they click the on button. I'm sure you've seen this in like dollar signs, start appearing. But we all know that's not reality. How did you get your app? How did you start marketing it? How did people find you? I don't know what the landscape is in sleep related apps out there. How did you really stand out in the marketplace?
No, that's a great question, and that leads us to kind of a whole different topic. So, I when I started working on this app, I was like, yeah, I think I'm starting to become an entrepreneur. I have to learn more about this, and I started went on YouTube and like heard people talk and stuff like that. And one person that I came across that you probably come across him is Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V. Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't, he's like, he's many things, but one thing he's really good with is like, marketing and social media, etc. So one thing he said, I believe I heard him say it, and I read it in one of his books too, was that whenever you have an idea, you got to start talking about it. You got to start talking about your idea. And that hit home with me. I was like, I got to do that. So I started a YouTube channel now like 2.5 years ago. And I just talked about sleep and insomnia and shared whatever I knew about it. And that became super important for many reasons. I want to say actually number one was this, that I thought I understood insomnia, but I didn't. I only partially understood it. But when people asked comments and I was like, oh, that's a good comment. Oh, I haven't thought about that. It really made me my teaching improved immensely. That was number one. Number two is I built a following, little by little, and this is a slow process, but little by little, like more and more people found it, and the channel grew. So when I had a product, I had somebody that could share it, and they almost became like my beta testers, my followers. Like, so that is basically all the marketing is through that like YouTube channel, and also word of mouth and a little bit other things, but that became really helpful.
I love it. So you're just basically, free content. So you're not paying for advertising at this point.
No, I mean, we've done like a, $10 Facebook campaign here, fiddled around a little bit, but it's only content marketing, exactly. Just sharing helpful information. And then a lot of people just come to you then because they trust you and they're like, yeah, I want to work with you.
And in terms of, so your company, you said your wife is involved, as well as, of course, the CTO. Are there other employees that you have, or is that about it?
Yeah, that's really it. We have one more partner, actually. His name is Alexander. He's he also serendipitously found me on the YouTube channel. And he happened to have like a company where he does like UX design, like user interface design, and he helped with designing the app. So that's the four of us are like the partners, and we're in that phase of a startup where like we're doing everything like marketing, coaching, everything ourselves. But I think we're very close to being able to hire somebody. I think that the next step for us is to hire a second coach, and so that will be the next kind of like litmus test of the model here, because a lot of the clients I have are people that sort of know me from the YouTube channel. So will it still work when we have a hired coach? I'm sure it will. It's, again, we have to tweak it, but that's kind of the next step for us.
Well, and obviously you're in a space that is going to continue to grow. I assume from the pandemic, I don't know anybody who's been sleeping soundly since the pandemic, and maybe right place or right time. But did you see any changes when you launched? Or I guess it's hard to say because you actually launched it during the pandemic for the most part, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think again, like when you're in the face, you have some natural growth, and I don't know if it's accelerated with the pandemic or not. But just generally speaking, I can tell that definitely the pandemic has affected people's sleep, and there are a lot of people have trouble sleeping nowadays. It's like that combination of like the stress, but also the like isolation and inactivity, and you can't do like insomnia. A lot of times comes from like, you have if you have more time on your hands, more time to ponder your sleep and more time to focus on it, actually typically gets worse. So like, yeah, it's a lot more people have trouble sleeping now.
Yeah. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, my son actually has a lot of issues with it, with insomnia, and it's because his mind's racing, and then it's just a vicious cycle. And and I know we spend money on it, from everything from pillows to cool blankets to meditation apps on their CBD, not yet CBT, but yeah, it certainly is a big issue. But you didn't rest on your laurels. You decided to create something called the Sleep Coach School. What is that about?
Absolutely. And it started off as kind of a separate project, but now I see there's a lot of synergy between the two. But so during this journey, like I was on Twitter and I connected with these two guys, Michael and Martin, who are both here in Oregon. And they're also really into like helping people with insomnia. And we chatted here and there. And a common theme was that we were like, oh my gosh, look at this article. Like, it's so unhelpful. And this is going to cause so much stress. And also like, oh, look at this person, that calls himself a sleep coach, but all they say is like not helpful at all. And then Martin, he was like, I wish there was some kind of like certification, so you could at least know that this person knows what they talk about, And then I was like, there's nothing like that. I was like, why don't we start that? Like, why don't we start actually certifying coaches? And Michael, the other guy, he was like, yeah, sure. And Martin had a lot on his plate, so he didn't join. But me and this other guy, Michael, we did that. So it became like it is like an online school. It's called the Sleep Coach School, and it was really designed for someone. Our initial thought was maybe somebody who's a counselor or maybe a doctor who wants to learn more about it. But I realized after a while that probably isn't going to be the thing, because doctors, counselors, we already have so much on our own plates. But so what we see now is that it's mostly somebody who actually had trouble sleeping, got past it, and now wants to help others. That those have become like most of our the students that we certify.
And I think it helped because I believe you have an MD or a DO behind your name that actually accelerated the process and made it more, certifiable, so to speak, or legitimate.
Absolutely. And I think, to this day, still being a doctor, it means something. A lot of people have confidence in doctors. And I think something I thought about that may be helpful for anyone that tunes in here is that, as a doctor, you do some things that are kind of pure medical. Like, you cannot call yourself a knee coach and start doing knee operations. That's not going to happen. That's not ethical. That's not right. But then you have things like in sleep, for example, we have insomnia, which is really not medical. It's just education and guidance. And you had your guest from the other podcast. What was his name again? Kevin
Picaro, yeah.
Isakaro, for example, pain doctor who sees that education about your relationship with pain, for example, is often what the problem is like. And so you could see that as a doctor, you actually do a lot of coaching too. So you could have, for example, a pediatrician who tells people how to potty train. Like, they could become a coach for that, just a silly example. But what I want to say is that as a doctor, you have a lot of opportunity because you actually do a lot of coaching, and you could take that into a whole different space if you want to.
What I like about this, I've coached doctors for years, and I've had a couple of sleep doctors who wanted to do entrepreneurial, and unfortunately, they either got into some financial issues. I know one in particular, he had a sleep center that, because of declining reimbursements, he had to close it. And I mentioned, insomnia is such a big issue. It's gratifying to hear, someone who kind of like a Doctor Who, like figured it out. And then, yes, it is something that you can do. And it sounds like not only are you, generating revenue from it, it sounds like you're having fun doing it too.
Absolutely. It's super gratifying. Like when you hear someone, I mean, literally you almost every week, somebody sends me a message and saying like, I'm sleeping again after so many years of struggling. And like, it's like, you changed my life, which is, by the way, all of us, we went to medicine for that. Right. And you can do that in traditional medicine, but you can do that as a coach too. And it's super gratifying. Absolutely.
And in addition too, I mean, talk about your reach now. I mean, obviously you have your patients in Eugene, but now, I assume you've got people from all around the United States and maybe beyond.
100%. Like I had a client that came on, on Bedtyme on the app, popped up as a client yesterday, and she was mentioning like, oh, it's super hot here, and I'm in Australia, and I was like, this is so cool. This is so cool. Like I have a client. I love every client wherever they are, but just reaching people in Australia or wherever, it's really cool. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're having a fun time doing. All the best of success to you. The name of the app is Bedtyme. And you can go to Bedtyme and bedtyme.co if you want to find out. And the sleepcoachschool.com, thesleepcoachschool.com. You also have a YouTube channel and a podcast also called the Sleep Coach School. It's been great talking with you, Daniel. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. If you have advice for, an inspiring physician app inventor or developer, what advice would you give them?
Absolutely. I would say, the classic one is just do it. Go ahead and do it. At least if you have that within you, you feel like I should be doing this, I want to do it. And the thing is that, yes, I spent a lot of money on an initial product that didn't really work that well, but I learned a ton from it. And if you're willing to like go there, learn from things that may not be that comfortable in the beginning, you can really get to a place where things turn around, you make back your investment and beyond, like you help people, and it can be fantastic. So just take the plunge, do it, and you'll learn. Thank
you so much. I so many lessons that we learned here. I love how you pivoted. You didn't give up. You knew that you had something of value to the world, and you weren't going to, and I'm sure there were times when you wanted to stop, right? You wanted to say, enough's enough. I know for you, or maybe it was your spouse, or family and friends, but and I think the world is a better place for it, guys. So Daniel, any last minute thoughts before we end the call today?
No, I just want to say that if anyone is just curious or wants to connect, have questions, then I'll share my bio with you, Mike, and very happy to talk with anyone that's even remotely interested in anything I do. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Daniel. Again, it's the Sleep Coach School. Bedtyme is the app. If you're considering an app, and want to learn more about it, I think Daniel made a very generous offer out there, and I really appreciate it. Learned a lot. As always, guys, don't stay stagnant. Don't just think about the idea over and over that someday it's going to happen. It's not going to happen, just like Dan says, unless you actually just do it. So again, guys, it's all about keep moving forward. Hey, Dr. Mike Lumeng with BootstrapMD. Thanks for listening to the program. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I encourage you to go and please leave and rate or review this podcast to wherever you're listening to it. It really helps me out, and it really helps me spread the benefits of physician entrepreneurship. Really appreciate it, and thanks again for listening.